You know the scene. After the resurrection, the disciples fish all night and catch nothing. Jesus stands on the shore. They cast the net again, and suddenly it is packed with fish. But John does something strange. He does not say they caught a lot. He says they caught exactly 153 large fish. Then, in the very same sentence, he tells us the net did not tear. Why preserve that number? Was 153 only the final count from a remarkable morning? Or did John expect his readers to notice something deeper? There is one thing we need to settle right away. John never stops and tells us, here is what 153 means. Anyone who claims there is one proven secret code is going beyond the text. But that does not mean the number is meaningless. In fact, once you follow the clues through John, then back into Ezekiel, the number starts sitting inside a pattern that is almost impossible to ignore. A pattern that ends, strangely enough, with something you can do tonight. And the first clue is not even the number. It is what Jesus does before the fish appear. The disciples are working in darkness. They have spent the whole night on the water. They have the boat. They have the net. They have years of experience, and they have nothing. Then a man on the shore tells them to cast the net on the right side. They do it. Now they cannot haul the net in because of the number of fish. Only after the catch does the beloved disciple realize who is standing there. It is the Lord. That order matters. Failure, a word from Jesus, a huge catch, recognition. Then the counting begins. And if Peter were simply telling the greatest fish story of his life, this is usually where the fish gets bigger every time the story is told. John does the opposite. He gives us a number so exact that people have been asking about it for nearly 2,000 years. So before we chase number patterns, we need to ask the simplest question first. What if 153 is there because somebody really counted the fish? That explanation deserves more respect than it usually gets. The scene is full of small details. The disciples are about 200 cubits from shore. Peter puts on his outer garment before jumping into the water. There is a charcoal fire waiting. Bread is there. Fish is already cooking. Then John gives the count. 153. That can sound like memory. The Net Bible notes make this point. The exact number may simply preserve a real detail from the event. A large catch had value. Fishermen had every reason to count what they brought ashore. Archaeology also shows that the fishing world described in the Gospels fits the first century Sea of Galilee. A fishing boat from that period was recovered from the lake area. No serious scholar can tell you that boat belonged to Peter or Jesus. It cannot prove John 21 happened exactly as written, but it does place the story in a real fishing culture with boats, nets, crews, and catches worth counting. So, 153 may begin as history. That does not end the question. Writers can preserve a real detail and still use that detail because it serves the meaning of the story. John does this all through his gospel. He remembers places, hours, meals, jars, distances, and names. But those concrete details often sit inside a larger pattern. Take the charcoal fire waiting on that beach. John uses that word only one other time in his gospel. It is the fire in the courtyard where Peter denied Jesus. A real fire, and a placed one. That is why we should not force a choice between real event and symbol. It could be both, a real catch, a real count, and a number John knew would echo something his readers had already heard. Christians noticed this very early. Augustine, writing centuries later, became fascinated by the arithmetic of 153. He noticed that if you add every whole number from 1 through 17, you get 153. 1 plus 2 plus 3, all the way through 17. That makes 153 what mathematicians call a triangular number. The math is real. Then Augustine gave the number a spiritual reading. He connected 10 with the commandments and 7 with the Spirit. 10 plus 7 gives 17, and the sum of the numbers from 1 to 17 gives 153. It is clever, it is ancient, but we cannot prove that John was thinking about Augustine's reading when he wrote the Gospel. And another famous explanation turns out to be even shakier. Jerome offered one of the most repeated answers to the mystery. He said ancient writers knew 153 kinds of fish. If the sea held 153 kinds, then a catch of 153 could picture every kind of person being gathered. It is a beautiful idea. It is also probably not good history. Scholar Robert Grant traced the claim and showed that the old natural history sources do not support a neat ancient belief that exactly 153 species of fish existed. So when you hear people in Jesus' time believed there were 153 species of fish, be careful. Jerome really did use that explanation. That does not make the ancient fish count true. And this is where the investigation gets more interesting. Because when one popular answer weakens, we are forced back into the text itself. Where else in Scripture do we find fishermen, nets, huge numbers of fish, and life appearing where there had been barrenness? That question takes us to Ezekiel. And now the number 153 stops floating by itself. Ezekiel chapter 47 gives a strange vision. Water flows out from the restored temple. At first it is shallow, then it gets deeper. The water becomes a river. Where the river goes, dead places come alive. Trees grow along the banks, and the prophet says the waters become full of fish. Then fishermen appear. They stand beside the water and spread their nets. Ezekiel even names the stretch of shore, from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim. That is already a striking match with John 21. Water, fish, fishermen, nets, an enormous catch, life where there had been emptiness. But scholar Richard Bauckham noticed something else. The names of those two places may carry the numerical clue. In ancient Hebrew, letters could also have number values. This kind of letter counting is often called gematria. It can become silly very fast if you start hunting numbers everywhere. With enough creativity, you can make almost any number seem important. So, a good number theory needs more than arithmetic. It needs context. That is why the Ezekiel proposal deserves attention. Both place names begin with the Hebrew word en, which means spring. So the parts that tell the two places apart are Gedi and Eglaim. Those are the parts that carry the numbers. The Hebrew letters in Gedi add to 17. The letters in Eglaim add to 153. And remember Augustine's mathematical observation. 1 plus 2 plus 3, continuing all the way through 17, equals 153. So Ezekiel gives us a fishing vision marked by two place names that can be read as 17 and 153. Then John gives us 153 fish. Does that prove John built John 21 around Ezekiel 47? No. Bauckham presents it as an argument, not as a verse where John explains the code for us. But this is much stronger than finding a random mathematical trick. Ezekiel is already talking about fishermen. He is already talking about nets. He is already talking about an overwhelming abundance of fish. And all of it comes from life-giving water flowing from the temple. Now look at John's Gospel. Early in John, Jesus speaks about the temple of his body. Later, Jesus cries out about living water. At the crucifixion, John makes a point of saying that blood and water flow from Jesus' pierced side. Then, after the resurrection, we arrive at a shore where an empty night becomes an overflowing catch. Temple, water, life, fish. That does not feel like a collection of random pictures anymore. It looks like a theme. And this is the point where the question changes. We started by asking, why 153? Now we need to ask, what is this enormous catch supposed to represent? Because John has already given us language for gathering people long before chapter 21. Go back to John chapter 11. The high priest speaks about one man dying for the people. Then John adds his own explanation. Jesus would die not only for one nation, but to gather into one the scattered children of God. Notice the words, gather, scattered, into one. Then move to John chapter 12. Jesus says that when he is lifted up, he will draw people to himself. The Greek verb there means to draw or pull. Now return to John chapter 21. The disciples have the fish in the net. Peter goes to the boat and draws the net to shore. The same Greek word appears again. Jesus said people would be drawn to him. At the end of the gospel, a net full of living creatures is drawn to Jesus on the shore. Scholar Joseph Romeo noticed this connection. Then he added another numerical observation. The Hebrew phrase translated, children of God, can total 153 when its letters are treated as numbers. Again, that does not give us mathematical proof of John's private thoughts. But look at the pattern we now have. John chapter 11 says the scattered children of God will be gathered into one. John chapter 12 says Jesus will draw people to himself. John chapter 21 shows the disciples drawing a huge catch to Jesus. And the catch is numbered 153. That is a serious literary case. It also explains why the scene is about more than fishing. Before his death, Jesus said he would draw people. After his resurrection, his disciples are the ones handling the net. The catch comes because they respond to his word. This is where the teacher Bill Donahue becomes useful. He is known for reading Bible stories as pictures of the inner life. His habit of reading scenes on more than one level fits here. You can respect the outer story while also asking what human process the story is showing. But we still need to let John's own language control the answer. The strongest inner theme here is not hidden anatomy, it is gathering. Something scattered becomes one. And John gives one more clue to make sure we do not miss it. The net is full, but it does not break. Why tell us that? If the point were only they caught 153 fish, the condition of the net could have been left out. John puts the two facts together. There are many fish, yet the net remains whole. That fits a theme running through the gospel. In John chapter 10, Jesus speaks of one flock and one shepherd. In John chapter 11, the scattered children of God are gathered into one. In John chapter 17, Jesus prays that his followers may be one. Then John chapter 21 gives us a huge catch held together in one unbroken net. The number points toward fullness. The net points toward unity. The mission is not merely to collect more and more people like numbers on a board. It is to draw what is scattered into one living whole. That is why 153 means lots of converts feels too thin. The picture is richer than that. Ezekiel saw life spreading through dead water until fish became abundant. John presents Jesus as the source of living water. Jesus says people will be drawn to him. John speaks of scattered children being gathered into one. Then a failed night of fishing ends with a huge catch drawn toward Jesus in a net that refuses to split. The clues converge. We still cannot say, John tells us 153 definitely means this one sentence. He does not. But the strongest reading is no longer a random number game. It is a picture of complete gathering, a full catch, people drawn from what was scattered, held together, brought to the shore where Jesus is waiting. And that pattern can also turn inward without pretending John was writing a medical code. Think about what your own mind does all day. Your attention scatters. One thought pulls this way. A worry pulls another way. A memory appears. Then a phone buzzes. Then you remember something from 3 years ago while trying to find your keys. Our minds can turn into a Sea of Galilee with no fishermen in sight. The inner movement of this story is the movement from scattering to gathering. The question worth asking is what this image is doing inside human experience. Here the answer is simple enough to test. Can what is scattered in you be gathered without being forced? That question leads straight to the practical ending of the story. Because Jesus does not tell the disciples to strain harder. He gives them one direction. They respond. Then the net fills. Here is what you do tonight. Sit somewhere quiet for 10 minutes. Do not try to empty your mind. You will lose that fight in about 12 seconds. Instead, give your attention one simple place to return. Use your breathing. Breathe in gently through your nose. Then let the breath out a little more slowly than it came in. Do not force a giant breath. Keep it soft. If 5 or 6 breaths a minute feels comfortable, stay near that pace. When a thought pulls you away, notice it. Then return to the breath. That is the practice. Scatter, notice, gather, return. There is a biological reason this can help. A 2018 review in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience looked at research on slow breathing and the nervous system. Slow breathing was linked with changes in heart rate variability, the tiny changes in timing between one heartbeat and the next. Those changes are tied to the autonomic nervous system, including activity connected with the vagus nerve. In plain language, slow breathing can help shift the body away from high alert and toward a calmer state. That calmer state does not erase your thoughts. It changes the conditions under which you meet them. Your attention becomes easier to gather. So do not turn meditation into another performance. You are not trying to catch 153 perfect thoughts. You are training one movement. What wanders can return. What scatters can be gathered. And now the strange number at the end of John makes sense in its larger setting. Maybe the disciples really counted 153 fish. That may be exactly how the number entered the story. But John places that count beside an unbroken net, after a gospel filled with living water, drawing, gathering, and becoming one. Ezekiel had already pictured fishermen spreading nets over waters made alive from the temple, between names that point to 17 and 153. John had already spoken of the scattered children of God being gathered into one. Jesus had already said he would draw people to himself. Then, on the final shore, the disciples draw 153 fish toward him. We cannot prove that every part of that pattern was a code John expected every reader to solve. We do not need to. The clues are strong enough to show why 153 has survived as more than a fishing statistic. It marks a catch so full that John wanted you to count it, and a gathering so complete that the net still did not break.